of the most appropriate attitude of that particular moment. He knows that his companions also have to adapt and is not surprised when they change their attitude. He gives each one the necessary time to justify his actions. But when it comes time to treachery, he is implacable. A warrior sits around the fire with his friends. They spend hours criticizing each other, but they end the night sleeping in the same tent, having forgotten all the insults that were bandied about. Occasionally, a new member joins the group. Because he does not yet share a common history, he shows only his good qualities, and some see in him a master. But the warrior of the light never compares him with his old companions in battle. He makes the stranger welcome, but he will not trust him until he knows his defects too. A warrior of the light does not go into battle without knowing the limitations of his ally. The warrior knows an old saying, quote, "If regrets could kill," unquote. And he knows that regrets can kill. They slowly eat away at the soul of someone who has done something wrong, and they lead eventually to self-destruction. The warrior does not want to die like that. When he acts perversely or maliciously, because he is a man of many faults, he is never too ashamed to ask forgiveness. If possible, he does his best to repair the wrong he has done. If the injured party is dead, then he does some good turn to a stranger and offers up that deed to the soul that he wounded. A warrior of the light has no regrets because because regrets can kill. He humbles himself and undoes the wrong he has done. All warriors of the light have heard their mothers say, quote, "My son wasn't thinking straight when he did that. Deep down, he's a very good person," unquote. Although he respects his mother, he knows that this is not true. He does not waste his time blaming himself for his rash actions, nor does he spend his life forgiving himself for all the wrong he has done. Doing that would never set him back on the right path. He uses common sense to judge not the intentions of an action, but its consequences. He takes responsibility for everything he does, even if he has to pay a high price for his mistake. As the old Arab proverb says, quote, "God judges a tree by its fruits, not by its roots." Before making any important decision, declaring a war, moving with his companions to another plane, choosing a field in which to sow seed, the warrior asks himself, quote, "How will this affect the fifth generation of my descendants?" A warrior knows that everything a person does has enduring consequences, and he needs to understand what kind of world he is leaving behind for that fifth generation. "It's just a tempest in a teacup," says someone to the warrior of the light. But he never exaggerates his difficulties and always tries to remain calm. And he never judges someone else's suffering. A small detail, which does not affect him in the least, could serve to ignite the storm brewing in his brother's soul. The warrior respects the suffering of others and does not try to compare it with his own. The cup of suffering is not the same size for everyone. "The most important quality on the spiritual path is courage," said Gandhi. "The world seems threatening and dangerous to cowards. They seek the false security of a life with no major challenges and arm themselves to the teeth in order to defend what they think they possess. Cowards end up making the bars of their own prison. The warrior of the light projects his thoughts beyond the horizon. He knows that if he does not do anything for the world, no one else will. So he fights the good fight and he helps others, even though he does not quite understand why. The warrior of the light pays close attention to a text that the soul of the world transmitted to Chico Xavier. Quote, "When you have managed to overcome grave problems in a relationship, do not spend time remembering the difficult times. Concentrate on the joy of having passed yet another of life's tests. When you emerge from a long period of medical treatment, do not brood on the suffering you endured. Think instead of God's blessing that allowed you to be cured. Carry in your memory for the rest of your life the good things that come out of those difficulties. They will serve as proof of your abilities and will give you confidence when you are faced by other obstacles." Unquote. The warrior of the light concentrates on the small miracles of daily life. He is capable of seeing what is beautiful because he carries beauty within himself. For the world is a mirror and gives back to each man the reflection of his own face. The warrior knows his faults and limitations, but he does all he can to maintain his good humor in moments of crisis. The world is, after all, doing its best to help him, even though everything around him seems to be saying the opposite. There is such a thing as emotional rubbish. It is produced in the factories of the mind. It consists of pain that has long since passed and is no longer useful. It consists of precautions that were important in the past, but that serve no purpose in the present. The warrior has memories too, but he learns how to separate the useful from the unnecessary. He disposes of his emotional rubbish. A companion says, quote, "But that's part of my history. Why should I jettison feelings that marked my very existence?" Unquote. The warrior smiles, but he does not try to feel things that he no longer feels. He is changing and he wants his feelings to keep pace with him. When the master sees that the warrior is depressed, he says, quote, "You are not what you seem to be in these moments of sadness. You are better than that. Many have left for reasons we will never understand, but you are still alive. But you are still here. Why did God carry all of those amazing people and leave you? By now, millions of people will have given up. They don't get angry. They don't weep. They don't do anything. They merely wait for time to pass. They have lost the ability to react. You, however, are sad. That proves that your soul is still alive." Unquote. Sometimes, in the middle of an apparently endless battle, the warrior has an idea and he manages to triumph in a matter of seconds. Then he thinks, quote, "Why did I labor for so long over a battle that could have been resolved with only half the energy I spent on it?" Unquote. The truth is that all problems seem very simple once they have been resolved. The great victory, which appears so simple today, was the result of a series of small victories that went unnoticed. Then the warrior understands what happened. He sleeps easy. Far from blaming himself for having taken so long to arrive, he is simply glad to know that he did arrive in the end. There are two types of prayer. In the first type, the person asks for certain things to happen and attempts to tell God what he should do. This does not allow the Creator either time or space in which to act. God, who knows perfectly well what is best for each of us, will continue to do as he sees fit. The person praying is left with the impression that his prayer went unanswered. In the second type, the person may not understand the Almighty's intentions, but he allows his life to develop according to his Creator's plans. He asks to be spared suffering. He asks for joy in the good fight, but he never forgets to add, "Thy will be done." This is how the warrior of the light chooses to pray. The warrior knows that the most important words in all languages are the small words: yes, love, God. They are words that are easy enough to say and which fill vast empty spaces. There is, however, one word, another small word, that many people have great difficulty in saying: no. Someone who never says no thinks of himself as generous, understanding, polite, because no is thought of as being nasty, selfish, and spiritual. The warrior does not fall into this trap. There are times when, in saying yes to others, he is actually saying no to himself. That is why he never says yes with his lips if, in his heart, he is saying no. First, God is sacrifice. Suffer in this life and you will be happy in the next. Second, people who have fun are childish. Remain tense at all times. Third, other people know what is best for us because they have more experience. Fourth, our duty is to make other people happy. We must please them even if that means making major sacrifices. Fifth, we must not drink from the cup of happiness. We might get to like it, and we won't always have it in our hands. Sixth, we must accept all punishments. We are guilty. Seventh, fear is a warning. We don't want to take any risks. These are the holy commandments that no warrior of the light can obey. These are the commandments that no warrior of the light can obey. A very large group of people is standing in the middle of the road, barring the way into paradise. The Puritan asks, quote, "What are these sinners doing here?" Unquote. The moralist bawls, quote, "The prostitute wants to join the feast?" Unquote. The guardian of social values yells, quote, "How can the adulteress be forgiven when she has sinned?" Unquote. The penitent rends his clothes, quote, "Why cure a blind man if all he cares about is his illness and when he doesn't even say thank you?" Unquote. The ascetic protests, quote, "You let that woman pour expensive oil on your hair? Why didn't she sell it instead to buy food?" Unquote. Smiling, Jesus holds the door open, and the warriors of the light go in despite the hysterical shouting. The opponent is wise. Whenever he can, he makes use of the easiest and most effective of his weapons, gossip. It doesn't take much effort to use it because others do the work for him. A few misdirected words can destroy months of dedication, years spent in search of harmony. The warrior of the light is often the victim of this trick. He does not know where the blow came from and cannot prove the gossip is false. Gossip does not allow him the right to defend himself. It condemns without a trial. When this happens, he puts up with the consequences and the undeserved punishment. For, as he well knows, words are powerful. But he suffers in silence and never uses the same weapon to hit back at his opponent. The warrior of the light is not a coward. You can give a fool 1,000 intellects, but the only one he will want is yours, says an Arabic proverb. When the warrior of the light starts planting his garden, he notices that his neighbor is there, spying. He likes to give advice on when to sow actions, when to fertilize thoughts, and water conquests. If the warrior listens to what his neighbor is saying, he will end up creating something that is not his. The garden he is tending will be his neighbor's idea. But a true warrior of the light knows that every garden has its own mysteries, which only the patient hand of the gardener can unravel. That is why he prefers to concentrate on the sun, the rain, and the seasons. He knows that the fool who gives advice about someone else's garden is not tending his own plants. In order to fight, you must keep your eyes open and have faithful companions by your side. It might happen that someone who was fighting alongside the warrior of the light suddenly becomes his opponent instead. The warrior's first reaction is hatred, but he knows that a blind combatant is lost in the midst of battle. And so he tries to see the good things that his former ally did during the time in which they lived side by side. He tries to understand what led to that sudden change of attitude, what wounds he had accumulated in his soul. He tries to discover what made one of them abandon their dialogue. No one is entirely good or evil. That is what the warrior thinks when he sees that he has a new opponent. A warrior knows that the ends do not justify the means. Because there are no ends, there are only means. Life carries him from unknown to unknown. Each moment is filled with this thrilling mystery. The warrior does not know where he came from, nor where he is going. But he is not here by chance, and he is overjoyed by surprises and excited by landscapes that he has never seen before. He often feels afraid, but that is normal in a warrior. If he thinks only of the goal, he will not be able to pay attention to the signs along the way. If he concentrates on only one question, he will miss the answers that are there beside him. That is why the warrior submits. The warrior knows about the waterfall effect. He has often seen someone mistreating another person who lacks the courage to respond. Then, out of cowardice and resentment, that person vents his anger on someone weaker than himself, who takes it out on someone else in a veritable torrent of misery. No one knows the consequences of his own cruelty. That is why the warrior is careful in his use of the sword and only accepts an opponent who is worthy of him. In moments of rage, he punches a rock and bruises his hand. The hand will heal eventually, but the child who got beaten because his father lost a battle will bear the marks for the rest of his life. When the order to move on comes, the warrior looks at all the friends he has made during the time that he followed the path. He taught some to hear the bells of a drowned temple. He told others stories around the fire. His heart is sad, but he knows that his sword is sacred and that he must obey the orders of the one to whom offered up his struggle. Then the warrior thanks his traveling companions, takes a deep breath, and continues on, laden with memories of an unforgettable journey. Epilogue. It was dark by the time she finished speaking. The two of them sat watching the moon rising. Many of the things you told me contradict each other, he said. She got up. Goodbye, she said. You knew that the bells at the bottom of the sea were not just a legend, but you could only hear them when you realized that the wind, the seagulls, and the sounds of the palm fronds were all part of the pealing of the bells. In just the same way, the warrior of the light knows that everything around him, his victories, his defeats, his enthusiasm, his despondency, form part of his good fight. And he will know which strategy to use when he needs it. A warrior does not need to be coherent. He has learned to live with his contradictions. Who are you? He asked. But the woman was already moving off, walking over the waves toward the rising moon. Thank you for watching. My name is Martin Imorage Wamoreivi, and I hope you enjoyed this awesome book. Adios.